Welcome to the Coaches Spotlight Podcast, the show where you'll be listening to coaches from around the globe that share their pitfalls and struggles all the way up to what made them successful in their field. Ready to catapult your coaching business past the competition? Then grab your favorite beverage and get ready to listen to meaningful conversations and learn from industry experts. Here's your host, Oliver Momeni.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Coaches Spotlight. Our next guest is a mentor, coach, and motivational speaker who is known for empowering his clients to overcome obstacles, find their inner peace, and self-trust. With an amazing ability to express complex topics in a remarkably simple and visual manner, he encourages his clients to rise stronger and gain more clarity in life. Please welcome Stephano.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you for inviting me. I feel very honored.
Now, we always start off the show with getting an insight from our guests with what they're specialized in and what is the outcome they guide people towards. In other words, what is your signature coaching program, Marco?
Well, that's a very good question. I aim for women who are either entrepreneurial, have an entrepreneurial streak, who are very conscious, but for some reason have faced a very difficult situation, either through a relationship breakdown or sudden loss or a career change that has been maybe difficult. And I help them basically to rise smarter and stronger from that difficulty or from the ashes, to speak it metaphorically. And I help them to change their inner game, which will impact their outer world. And so that means I help them to shift mindsets, to break patterns that kept them stuck, so that they are able to make better decisions and become more successful and more fulfilled. And the reason why it's so powerful, because it will affect not only themselves, it will affect their relationship, their leadership, their career, their vocation, or it will spill over. So that's what I'm aiming for that particular woman out there.
So if you want to find out more about Marco's program, head on over to marcostephano.com. Now, before we move on, for those of you that are a coach or a consultant, or you want to become one and have not created your signature program yet, then you're leaving a ton of money on the table. But no worries, I got you covered. My team and I have put together a guide that teaches exactly how to design your signature program. The exercises throughout the guide will systematically help you in creating a successful program, all the way up to how much to charge for it. So if you want to grab a free copy of this guide, then head on over to coachesspotlight.com/guide. That's coachesspotlight.com/guide. Marco, share with us a success quote or mantra and an example of how you've applied its meaning in your life.
Well, I found that's a hard one because I have a few, but of course you have to put one down. So I think the one that I try to remind myself daily is the way your mind is fed, your life is led.
Uh-huh. I like that one. Tell us, how have you ingrained that in your life?
That has not always been easy, but what I've come to understand through my own journey, that our life is dictated by the way how we think, and the way how we think is determined by our belief system. And so what really needs to tackle is my belief system. And sadly, I grew up in a quite dysfunctional family, in the sense of dynamics. And I learned quite some, how you said it, wrong scripting in my head, and part to do was with rejection, with not being wanted before I was born, and that had a kind of huge impact in my emotional and mental development. So never felt really part of the family dynamic, even though of course we were family from the outside, but that had huge implication. And of course other things happened throughout life. And I realized the way how we think has such huge impact in how we behave. And through a lot of events, painful events, and we may come later on that, that led me to a crisis point that made me realize I really need to get hold of the way I feed my mind. What is going in? It's almost like passport control. I've allowed so much stuff to just cross border without even checking out, what is this thought causing to do in my life? I just let it pass through, and then it had its impact. And so through process, partly through coaching, I begin to renew my mind to basically get to control what do I allow in and what do I want to maintain or entertain in my life that is better, so produce better quality of decision, better quality of choices, and therefore also better responses when things happen to me. So that is a kind of mantra that I remind myself, because the quality of our thinking really determines the quality of our life, our relationship, and our results.
Very profound, Marco. You know, I think how we move through life is 100% in our control. However, it does happen that we let go of it, pretty much how you've described with the passport control. Interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, because I think, let's give an example. You know, when 5 years ago, went through a huge crisis where I lost everything, and relationship breakdown, a loss of home, and resources, friendships, financial resources were tight, and so was basically suicidal. And in that process, looking back, and please keep that in context, because of course when you look back, you look differently than when you're completely in the midst of it. But when I reflect back, when I was in that deep darkness, or bombarded with thoughts of despair and depression and anxiety and fear, and had panic attacks, was just horrendous, and contemplating to end your life, I realized on that looking back, how much mental war zone was going on, and I had to somehow get control back over it, begin to realize not every thought is my thought. I have to observe more from above what is really going on here. What am I really entertaining? What am I really allowing myself? And of course, it's not easy immediately, because it has been a journey for me. And then, of course, you mix it up with all the emotions that are stirred, sadness and grief and anger and anxiety and fear. It's all triggers. But I begin to realize it's so important to get hold of what thought is empowering, what thought is disempowering. And I did also some research with neuroscience, which gave me a lot of insight as well, understanding the brain, how the mind operates. And I had a significant experience that basically helped me not to commit suicide, but to basically ignited my transformational journey. And that was spiritual. Maybe the best to explain it. When I was contemplating it, I had a spiritual experience that a peace cloud came over me that was so thick of peace that made me basically be quiet. I was weeping initially beforehand, and it was very painful. And I just became quiet, completely calm. And it was in the middle of the night, or before not middle of the night, but just before around 7 in the night, nearby the sea. And the next moment, I had a vision of a picture of Jesus smiling at me, and he was voicing internally, "Marco, do not worry." And the internal voice, which was quiet in a sense, was so profound, powerful, basically made me weep again. But that was a different weeping. That was a kind of a weeping of relief, a relief of like, I can breathe again. And that experience was huge. It didn't mean that the next day everything was fine, not at all. But it has been, and I've reflected a lot on that. And the reason why I'm telling you this is that peace is the antidote, in my understanding, of anxiety. Because when I look back into the definitions, anxiety in the root word, it basically means pulling you into different parts. That's what anxiety tends to do. While peace is integrating us into wholeness. It basically stabilizes us. Now, why is this so important? And I'm not, by the way, a scientist or a medical expert, but this is my own understanding and my exploration. I begin to realize if I focus on fear and anxiety, we know that cortisol is being released in the brain, which basically is the stress hormone, because it helps us to counteract when we are fearful or we are under high stress. The problem with it, if that's going on for longer than is normal, we start to think in a cage of fear. So everything we perceive becomes bigger, which basically means make it worse. So more anxiety, more fear, and therefore, in my case, I had even panic attacks because there was so much uncertainty going on. The mind tries to find a solution, can't find a solution, so gets it overheated, and therefore basically is panicking. Peace, on the other hand, is very different. And what I recognize now through my spiritual connection with my relationship with God, God says he's the God of peace. Jesus, he's the Prince of Peace. It's a peace that's beyond this world. By reconnecting with him, I begin to be filled spiritually with peace, which helps me to get more clarity in my thinking. It helps me to clarity to see things more in perspective. Now, interestingly enough, when that is happening, it starts to release endorphins in the brain. And endorphins in the brain is activating the reward center, which makes us basically feel good, makes us feel more at ease. Therefore, we can start to think more clearly and more straight. So for me, I see there is a clear connection from a spiritual point of view that can influence our thought life, and therefore our thought life influences our responses and reactions. And so that has hugely been helpful for me. Therefore, I practice a lot of meditation and reflection and prayer, because I know when my connection with God is strong, it immediately is my power source. It's like being plugged into the power circuit, where electricity is basically give you the power that you wouldn't have on your own. You can't produce light. It's produced by electricity as soon as you switch on the light. That's basically what I would compare it with. So that helped me to get more control about my thought life. And then I began to realize a lot of my thinking was rooted in certain limited beliefs that I grew up with or learned through painful events in my life that's connected with emotional memory. And they basically became a script. And by tracing it back, where did my narrative start? Where did this belief system start? And begin to change them. That resulted into better thoughts and therefore better behavior. So that's why I'm so convinced. If we get control, and that sounds a bit heavy, but in one sense, if we get more observant about what are we entertaining in our thoughts, what's going on, what do we allow, to get, to navigate ourselves with, that determines where we are going. And so in the beginning, when I had fearful thoughts still and anxiety, I began to stop myself and say, no, wait a minute, what am I entertaining here? Where am I focusing on? And that's another thing. What we focus on, we empower. Where, there's Tony Robbins, I think, once said, energy flows where attention goes. And it's exactly the same kind of dynamic. So I began to realize I have to redirect my thought pattern into more peace mode, because peace mode means I'm stabilizing myself, I'm grounding myself so that I'm better able to operate. It's quite an extensive answer, probably, but
love it. Now, you've touched upon several things that I could leave out the next question, but let's dig even deeper, Marco. What was the main reason why you started your coaching business?
The main reason started, basically for me, in the midst of my adversity, interestingly enough.
Tell us more.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I have to dig back to that moment in time. I think after I had that spiritual encounter and things were even becoming worse in reality with my circumstances, I got divorced, lost my home, etc. I initially had counseling in order to help me process stuff, the grief and the loss, etc., and had some therapy. I did begin to realize it's not helping me further. I want to get a hold of my future. And I read a lot of books, all kinds of different subject matters in order to gain understanding, to help me cope, but also to get some more insight. And one of those books was The Dream Giver, which is an amazing book. It's a parable, it starts with a parable, and I love parables because they speak to the heart metaphorically, and there is a message in it, and that message immediately bypasses all your logic and all your rational thinking. It just speaks more to your emotion, at least for me. And that book basically was the trigger, because something came alive in me. I thought, my goodness, what if I become a coach? What if I start to explore this? And besides that, and that's, I think, the key, which coaching for me is just one of the vehicles to express my talent or my vocation. And I have to go back to that moment in time, to probably a couple of months after my crisis, where I was in a painful moment. One day I read a poem, and this poem is written by Tolkien from Lord of the Rings. And I love the movies of Lord of the Rings for all kinds of different reasons. I love the characters, and I recognize myself in certain characters, like Aragorn and Gandalf, the journey that they were walking through in order to become who they were born to be. These 4 sentences, one day, I can still remember, I read those 4 sentences, and as soon as I read them, I started to weep. My heart started to burn as if something got imprinted in it. And I'm thinking, or I'm feeling, my goodness, why am I getting so emotional? Why is this hitting me so much? Why do I feel this burning in me? And then just suddenly it just hit me. Because those 4 sentences exactly describe my journey and my story. And I will just say it. From the ashes, a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadow shall spring. Renewed shall be the blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. Now, why is that so powerful? And this is my interpretation of it. From the ashes, a fire shall be woken. What happened spiritually, for me, that is, of course, a very personal, but my personal phase is key. Jesus basically came to ignite this passion flame, fan it into flame again. And it reminds me what is said in somewhere in Isaiah, where he said it refuses to extinguish the burning wick. Something that is almost sniffed out. He refuses it, so he fanned it into flame, and that is what happened. And I believe passion is so important in our lives, because passion is the driving engine of what makes us come alive, that energizes us, that motivates us, makes us rise out of bed. And so that happens, so that's such a key. The second element, a light from the shadow shall spring. Hope and an awakening is so important, I realize, in people's lives, and also in my own life. If you have no hope, people lose the plot very quickly. So hope and an awakening of spirit is so important, because it makes us come alive. It gives us we can breathe. And that happened exactly also when I had that spiritual encounter. The third element, renewed shall be the blade that was broken. That hit me so much, because I thought there's no purpose for me anymore. I thought always there's something wrong with my life. There's a fault in the production line that tends to went always through my head. Everyone is working fine, but somehow something is wrong with me, and it didn't work out for whatever reason. So my purpose, I don't even know anymore what it is. Or I blew it up, I messed up, it's broken to pieces. Is there any sense? But that basically is saying, renewed shall be the blade. Your purpose can be renewed. Your purpose can be restored. Your purpose can be returned. Your purpose can be resurrected, which basically means, wow. And then the fourth element, the crown again shall be king. That all speaks about confidence. That all speaks about your true identity. And why is that so important? Because all those 4 elements are so essential and interlinked. Because what I begin to realize, I carry a sword. That sword is forged in the fire of adversity. That sword is hammered on the anvil of testing trials. And I have gone through a lot of stuff in my life, painful experiences, all kinds of stuff. And that's being forged in that sword. All the sweat, the tears, pain, and struggles, and all kinds of other stuff. It's all forged into it. But it's also inscripted with a unique life message. So this sword is unique to me. It doesn't belong to anyone else. People can clone it or copy it, but it has no same effect. This is my sword. But in order to wield this sword, to have this sense of purpose, I need to wield it with knowing who I am. And only because of knowing who you are, you can wield this sword and basically give it a good blow, and mean it in a positive way. How many people out there struggle with, who am I? Or have lost their confidence because things that happened in our life, or they feel like, I messed so much up, my purpose is gone. Is there even a purpose for me? But if you bring them all together, and that's the whole point, you can bring it together and you can reactivate it. It becomes very powerful. And so that was the root cause of starting me. Well, how can I express this in the best way possible? And when I discovered coaching, I believe in the power of coaching, because the true nature of coaching is to empower. And that means giving people their authority back, the authority that they lost, the authority that has been squashed or broken down because they even lost their sword, their influence. So coaching helps people to be empowered to get that back so that they can thrive again, so that they can rise again, that they can make their impact for what they were created for. And for me, that is one of the expressions. I have other expressions, which is through writing and through speaking. Those are my arrows. And that's why I began this journey into coaching, become qualified and, train into it to sharpen my skills and surround myself with coaches who are better than me so that I keep pushing myself, to improve, to help people and serve people better.
Everything you just said resonates with me on so many levels, I can't tell you. Which is probably the reason why we were talking for over an hour before we started recording. And we said we better get going with the interview, otherwise we'll be sitting here for hours. It's not difficult to see that you're passionate about with all that you're saying. And that is very energizing to see. Now, I need to know one more thing before we move on. And that is, behalf of what you've already shared with us, what else was holding you back from becoming a coach?
Oh, yes. A lot of kryptonite was going on in my life. The lack of concept, and maybe this deeper thing. Am I really making a difference? Am I someone who can offer value? Am I someone who can really make a difference? I think I have learned so much the opposite voice of, when I grew up, I did not have many friends. I was either quite isolative or lonely in that sense. And so there was always this this either something wrong. So who are you? And I think getting my voice back, this is something else. I think for me, even this interview that we have, for me, it's part of my journey to start voicing, well, this is who Marco Stephano is, and this is who he is in his authenticity.
Absolutely.
But in coming to the place to start voicing it, and I think for a long time, I didn't feel confident enough for all kinds of reasons, for past voices, experience that I had with leadership, quite abusive and controlling leadership styles that basically knocked me out. I can give you an example. Last year, somebody gave me an opportunity to speak in a small kind of group, and that speaking was my first speaking since 14 years. People didn't know that, but that was for me because 14 years before that, I had some opportunities, but it just got shut down. And so when I had this opportunity again, and I spoke there for the first time after such a long time, the feedback that I gained afterwards was overwhelming. There was a coach present. I didn't realize that he was a communication coach or speaker coach, and he gave me so much positive feedback. I was really blown away by it. He said, "Are you kidding me? Are you serious?" And he basically affirmed something in me that built up the confidence in order to a next stepping block, in order to start voicing myself. And I think breaking through those barriers of kryptonite, fear, intimidation, all that stuff that goes through your head. But I talked earlier about, clean it out and start doing it. That's another side of the coin. To break those things, you have to act upon it. And this is one of the reasons, I'm so grateful for having this interview, because for me, it's also an expression of, okay, I have to break through these layers, invisible layers, whatever it is, start voicing it, start to communicate who I am and make my stamp in this world. And I appreciate what you're saying, because it is very interesting to hear another coach speaking to me and validating something that you sometimes don't see. Because I do know more now. I carry a sword. I feel always like Optimus Prime. I know it's a movie in a way, but he's a transformer, and I like that word transformer. And his mission is on planet Earth, to bring transformation. And that's what I see myself doing. I want to bring transformation through my sword, not to put the attention on me, but to basically help people to be transformed so they can do what they are best at, what they are born to be. And I have to find a way of vocalizing that. So it's also, you validating and saying this through this kind of interviews is helping me to get my own voice back. Because I think a lot of people can recognize, how many people have lost their voice for whatever reason, and they don't step up, or they they don't want to say what they really want to say because they're either afraid for rejection or, being ridiculed or being embarrassed. I recently had a conversation with a woman I'm coaching or mentoring more, facing that similar issue, not feeling important enough that her voice will add something in a meeting, and therefore is not stepping up. And we trace it back to scripts, basically viruses implanted in her past that basically prevents her from voicing it. And that's, of course, something I can relate to as well.
Regardless what we've experienced in life or what we're dealing with in a moment, it's always that inner voice that screws with us in a good and in a bad way. Now, we need to not forget, when that inner voice talks to us, its main job is to protect us, right? Recently, I heard someone saying that we should silence the inner voice, but that is not the way to approach it. The same goes for fear. We're not supposed to eliminate it. The art is to learn how to dance with both of them. It's not as if we can get rid of the inner voice or fear, nor should we. Fact of the matter is, they both kick in when we step out of our comfort zone. Specifically, when we think of or decide to become a coach. That inner voice will immediately question it and ask you, who are you to help others? Followed by fear that also wants to protect us by adding the fear of the unknown. You said something very interesting in the pre-interview. If I recall it correctly, you said, we live the life for the people we are called to reach. And that is so true when it comes to coaching. There's nothing worse than deciding to become a coach because you have given good advice to friends or family without having gone through their pain. I always say a good coach has experienced the exact same thing he or she wants to coach people in. In other words, you need to have skin in the game. Otherwise, you have no business in coaching others. I know it sounds a bit harsh, but we should not forget, coaching comes with a huge responsibility and should not be taken on lightly, as you become a partner of theirs that guides them to experience a transformation. And this partnership bonds both of you. Now, let me ask you something else. Would you have done anything differently before you began your career as a coach?
Well, that is a good question. And initially, I wrote an answer on that when I was reflecting on it. Would I do anything differently? And I thought, well, if the situation was ideal and I had the financial resources, I would hire the best coach I could get hold of. But then I'm realizing now, when you ask me this question again, then I realize one thing. My journey has been a roller coaster. And it's exactly where the gift lies. Because you said it earlier, my sword has to be having scratches. I don't trust a sword that is basically never used and is on display.
Yes.
That doesn't build trust. That to me means basically you are a show off.
Correct.
It sounds a bit blunt, but I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. So I realize now, and this is interesting to hear me saying this, all these experiences, and some of them I wish not them to anyone because some of them had impact for decades over my life. Yet I can now basically say they were part of my journey and they forced my sword. And because of that sword, it has huge impact because it can cut through chains that maybe a super coach, that experience would not have given me. And I think it's the experience that people are after. And I appreciate what you're saying, and we had this also in our discussion. I think my clients connect with me, and one lady basically said it very profoundly, because she was a stranger. I met her in a coffee place years ago, and we ended up having a conversation. I was busy on my laptop, and she was sitting on the right, and suddenly we had this conversation, and one led to the other, and then she said, "Can I hire you?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course you can hire me." So after an hour and a half, she hired me. And so the next day we had a coaching session and, off it went. And she had a breakthrough. But then another friend in the States on that time frame basically said, "Marco, how the heck do you do this? She's a complete stranger, and yet they hire you on the spot. You have to ask her why she did it." And I said, "Okay." And so I went back and said, "Well, what was the reason that you hired me? Because I was a stranger to you." And this is what she said. And I thought, wow, I was really blown by, in one sense, really blown away by it. She said, just in the short phrase, "You know pain. I know you will get me. And that's why I hired you.
Love it.
And I think that's something we need to carry. Yes, it's not about me, because our coaching, of course, isn't about me. It's all about the client. It's about drawing them out. But yet people need to feel that they are safe, that they feel connected, that they can trust you. And the only way they can sense that, if you have gone through adversity, if you have gone through your trials yourself and you came on top of it, but you know the scars, you know the impact of it, and people will pick up on that. And when that is there, it creates a safe space, it creates a safe haven that they realize, my goodness, I can work with this person because he knows where I'm coming from. And that takes away already certain obstacles, that people for all kinds of understandable reasons may have. And it's not about convincing, because I don't really like that. And then I love what you talked about earlier before we started. It's not about sales. I don't like this whole sales stuff. It is about a partnership. It's about basically helping people to move forward. Another way I like to describe it, I see myself as a cross-pollinator, and that basically means an element is added to someone else, or in the natural world from flowers, but I see it more with people. Another element is added that causes stimulation and growth. So that's what I love to see happening with a coaching context. When you are hiring me, you will add stimulus of growth that will push you through barriers so that you basically can fly again. But having said that, it has to have, I believe, a life story behind it, because that's what people will connect with. So, yeah.
Marco, let's talk about failure. Take us back to a time in your life where you've experienced failure and share with us the lessons you have learned from it.
Go back in time where I failed. Well, I failed on different moments in life, but the stronger one was then, a couple of years ago. The lessons that I learned, and that's basically, there are various things. Some lessons you only learn when you're exposed to certain scenarios, situations in life. And the way I phrase it, diamonds are found in deep, dark places, not on the street.
Ooh.
And I have seen a lot of darkness in my own journey, and it's high pressured. And looking back, I realized in the ashes, diamonds are made from ashes, basically under high pressure. And I have been in those places of pressure, sometimes so mentally, emotionally painful. But it's in those moments that when you press through and ask questions, that you find the diamond, you find the treasure, basically, to come out of it. And all kinds of other thoughts and lessons came out of that. Another thing that I've learned, a strong spirit can sustain you, but when the spirit is crushed, you're gone. And the reason why I'm saying this, it's a verse that I think is mentioned somewhere in the Psalms, and it one day stood out to me. And I've seen people who have strong bodies, muscular or healthy, etc., but yet their spirit is broken and they lose it quickly. So you can be physically strong, you can be mentally maybe intellectual and smart, but if your spirit is not strong because it's crushed for all kinds of things, you go really quickly downhill. But if your spirit is strong, even when you go through trials or physical troubles, your spirit makes you basically keep going. And that is the differentiator. And so that's something I've learned. And so one of the things I applied immediately, quite quickly, when all this painful stuff happened, is choosing to forgive. Because I'm convinced that forgiveness is the fastest route for your mental health and your well-being.
Absolutely.
Not to forgive will undermine you, and it will be like poison that will basically affect not only yourself, but your relationship. It will seep out through anything you touch. And so I recognized, to get my spirit strong, choosing to forgive myself, the people concerned, even God. I had a court case against God, my goodness. Even bringing to let it go and not to punish and not to judge also gives release, and that gives also the peace we so crave for. I've noticed that too. it also gives you a lot of compassion. It gives you also a lot of sense of, not because you are better or not because but understanding we all have our stories, we all have pain, we all do certain things that hurt other people. But once you understand the story behind it, then you begin to realize, oh my gosh, I know it's not right. No, it was not. I don't want to be exposed to it, but it happened. And now I understand you better why you did it. So that's another lesson that I've learned. Not what happens to you, but how you respond will determine the outcome. So we can initially had a victim kind of mindset, like, oh, why is this happening to me, and blame. But quickly I realized that's not going me anywhere, and basically leads to a hellish kind of scenario. And I thought, no, I have to ask myself, what can I learn from this? How can I turn this disadvantage into advantage? How can I turn this pain into gold for somebody else's gain? By facing it, by confronting it, by digging in deep and confronting my own darkness and dealing with my own demons and my own pain. Because I made mistakes. I caused hurt in talking about my ex, I caused hurt in her life too. I had a porn issue, not involved with other women, but I had an issue because that was my coping mechanism. Now looking back, traced back to my childhood. And I know that has impact. You hurt people, well, in this case, my ex with it. And I knew I had to deal with it, even though she was aware of it. I still had to deal with it, and I had to stop avoiding stuff. I had to root it out. And so taking ownership, and the only way I say it to people, ownership means own your ship. What did you allow on your ship that shouldn't be there? Or another way of saying it's leadership. Take lead of your own ship. And the sad story is I allowed stuff on my ship that had caused havoc, and I have to get rid of it. But then also make a decision, well, wait a minute, what do I want on board that would help me to move forward? So I really had to make some choices and become more healthy in my thinking, in my approach, in my dealing, in my responses. And also, reaching out to people and recognizing, I really blew up, I messed up. I had to also, in the conversation with my daughter, we had some good talks about this in time, and acknowledging, I have not been a good father. I wish I had better responses, or that I was not less focused on myself because of all kinds of other things that were going on. She needed me, and I have not always been there emotionally. Well, she needed that. Acknowledging it is so important. Another thing that I learned, your inner game impacts your outer world. And that applies in so many different ways. Life starts from the inside out, not the other way around. And that's something I'm learning from my relationship with Jesus, because one of the things that really stood out of me in this story of Jesus in the storm, I don't know if people are familiar with it, but it's just this story that he was sleeping in a storm and the disciples were freaking out. Although they were, qualified and experienced fishermen, and he was just sleeping. And then he wakes up and then quiets the storm down. And then he says, "Where's your faith?" That means you can only have control over your storm if you have peace within. If you have no peace within, you can't command the storm externally to quiet down. And that means, how can I cultivate peace within myself in order to not be dictated by my external circumstances, but that basically my circumstances are being affected by my internal climate. But that means I have to pay attention. That means I have to work on those things. And that's where you change the atmosphere. And I've noticed sometimes, not always, I'm a work in progress, but sometimes people even pick up on that. They basically say it. They say, "My goodness, you have so much peace. How the heck do you do that?" And a lot of times they sense more my anxiety. So of course you get then a different response, but I realize it's so important that we cultivate a climate inside ourselves that is stabilizing things, because that's what people pick up on. And so, well, of course, there are so many lessons you learn through adversity. It's another thing I've learned. Adversity is like a paint stripper. It strips you from all the conditioning of layers built over the years, of whether that's culturally, whether it's religious-wise, whether that's corporate-wise, whether it's from your background, or what people think you should do, or what I think I should do myself, all this stuff. adversity and hitting rock bottom tends to strip you to the bare wood of authenticity. And that's why I realize now it removes you from all your masks, all your coping mechanisms, all your attachments to your heart, where you try to, well, I need that, or I need that in order to feel more important, to feel more significant. It brings you back to, can I completely be where I am, naked enough? Yes, I am. Now that can be a scary place if you've always tried to mask it. But if you come to the place of accepting, then it's the biggest freedom that no one ever can take you away. I love this. It reminds me of a story of a gladiator that most people probably will recognize, where a gladiator is wearing this mask and he has to basically put it off in front of the emperor, because the emperor asks, who you are, show yourself. And for me, that represents the mask that we're wearing for our lives, because things have happened to us and we hide it behind a mask. And now in front of the emperor, who basically has the power to condemn him to death, and to shame him, and to accuse him, he chooses to become vulnerable. He chooses to basically say, well, this is my truth. This is who I truly am. So I say, and of course he had more kind of revengeful kind of approach, but I would basically then say, I'm a man of many ex-titles, but this is who I am. And I'm in service of the high, the creator, to advance people's lives. You can give it your own twist. But it's that removing of the mask of daring to become vulnerable so that people can see for who you truly are, without any pretense, without any, look better. That is very freeing. That's something I've been learning through this whole process. I've also learned to dance on water in the midst of uncertainty. This crisis that have happened recently was just for me like a rehearsal, and I don't mean it any disrespectful, but for me it was like, how can I learn to even be content in the midst when things are uncertain? Because that's what I've learned for the last 5 years, when things were not certain at all. And now I'm feeling like I'm arriving at a place like I can dance on water. And that is really profound. It's almost, that makes me smile. It's like, wow, I'm finally getting to a place of freedom that I haven't had experience before. And I think that's really accelerating. That's really exciting. Sorry, I went on a roll here.
Love it. Love it. It's not the act of failing that leads to success. It's failing and then getting back up and trying over and over again until it works out. And coming back from failure or being defeated teaches resilience. And resilience is the one quality all successful people have in common, right? That said, the words failure or failing aren't words I use often, as they have this negative vibe to them. I see failure as life giving us feedback how to move forward. So it's all about learning from that feedback and adjust, pivot, and move forward. Marco, let's shift gears. Share with us a story of a time in your journey when you had an aha moment. Take us back to that very moment and talk about the steps you took to turn that moment into success.
So that moment of the shift really happened when I had that spiritual encounter. The sentence, a strong spirit that will sustain you, but of course not. The shift is being a strong spirit. That may be basically the trigger to fight back and to come on top of things. So that was, and I realize now that is the key for the whole transformation. So that lead me to where I'm now today, strong spirit, alive and kicking.
Keywords here are strong spirit, alive, and kicking. That's what I was thinking when I knew I only had 30 minutes to live before saying goodbye to this planet. Now, I'm not going to get into it here because it's a longer story. But if you want to catch up on how I beat death, then head on over to the first episode of this podcast where I talk about how a near-death experience was partially responsible for starting my consulting agency in 2008, which then eventually led me to becoming a coach and fast forward to 2020, launching this podcast. Marco, tell us, what do you believe is the one common myth about being a coach that you want to debunk?
Probably that you have to be ready, that you have to be perfect, or in order to start, that you only when you have done all your training and all your certification, etc., and that you then maybe have the moment that you can do something. Yes, I've done my training, which helped up my confidence, but I realize now the true coaching skill or talent is already residing in you, and trusting that gift by listening deeply, intuitively, and let the questions come to you when you're listening to people. You can do that already. And I think what I sometimes sense with coaches is that, all this training, and because, yes, we have cultivated this kind of growth mindset, we want to keep on learning and developing, but that can also prevent us from basically start doing it. You just start doing it, whatever you have, and start to multiply it. So don't think that you have to be perfect before you can start it. That's what I would describe as the myth. It may not resonate with everyone, but that's what I've encountered in my own life, but also with other coaches.
Interesting. Which leads me to ask you, do you see it as a requirement being certified as a coach, or do you think people can start their coaching business and get certified later on?
Well, there are different thoughts on that. It depends also a bit on the industry, because I haven't talked with other coaches. I know, for example, in the corporate world, the tendency is that they want to see qualifications because that somehow it builds the credibility and is stronger, which I understand. But as I said earlier, if you have a talent, you can already start. But in order to reinforce it, like with any talent, I believe you need to cultivate it more. You can enhance it more, and that means have input. My coaching skills started to sharpen by having other coaches, by going through training with a master coach, and keep on doing that, by the way, because I always learn from other coaches, either through peer-to-peer coaching or barter coaching, exchanging this as a service to one another, always with the aim I want to improve my skills. And I think that is necessary if you are serious about what you're offering. I think certification is helpful when it is accredited, when it is, not just theoretically, because I see there are some courses out there who only cover the theory of coaching, which I think is nice, but it's not cutting deep. You need to have experience, you need to practice it. And I think that's where good coaching programs make the difference, because they basically practice you in front of others, and they give you feedback on afterwards, how you're doing and what could you do better, how, all these kind of things. And that's how you learn. We are now in a world where coaching becomes much more normal, depending where you live. In America, it's more accepted, and then in Europe, although in Europe it's as far as I understand, accepted in the corporate world, executive coach, performance coaching. It's an industry that is rising fast, and that must raise the question: do we need to have more accreditation in it? Because, like with counseling, particularly in some countries, you can't even do counseling if you're not certified, and that's basically also to protect the people and knowing, basically give them the awareness. Do you know what you're doing? And I think in that angle, that's one of the reasons I got certified or did my coach training, because I want to communicate to the client, to the people I'm working with. I take you seriously, and I want you to know that I'm knowing what I'm doing. I'm not just doing this for luck. I'm doing this because I'm dealing with people's hearts, I'm dealing with people's minds, I'm dealing with people's lives. And I believe you have to treat that with respect and with honor. And therefore, it's my responsibility, as far as I am, to improve that talent. So there is a balance. So I'm not saying, you can't start when you don't have a certificate. Please start, because that's how I started. But if you're really serious, then make sure you get input, and that means either through training that is proper, and surround yourself with coaches that are better than you, because that's how you grow. I may add a thought on that. because that's maybe a bit deeper in a sense. For me, it's not about a title, because you can have the title and yet don't have it. So for me, coaching, even though I know that people connect with the word coaching because that's what the word that we're using, but for me, it's already in you. It's already present, because that's the gift. You don't have to prove the gift, because people will pick up on it. You have it already. And therefore, accreditation would maybe be nice. But even if you don't have the title, I said earlier, people will basically already sense it, like, wow, you are a coach. You see what I'm trying to say?
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. We should not forget, it's the feeling of certainty that we pass on to them that we can get them to where they want to go. And they feel that. No certification from any organization can pass on that feeling. However, it won't do any harm to get certified, as it gives you structure in how to implement your program. But it shouldn't hinder you from starting to coach. I can't tell you how many clients I've had over the years that think they're not allowed to coach because they have not been certified. One thing is for sure, no certification is going to get anybody magically new clients. Did you know 87% of coaches or consultants from around the globe go out of business in their first year? And the main reason why they go out of business is because they didn't figure out how to generate a steady stream of new clients. Therefore, my team and I have created a workshop that outlines exactly what we do to generate a consistent stream of new clients month in, month out for our business and for our clients. So if you're a coach or consultant and you're committed to changing more lives with your expertise, then I encourage you to register for the free masterclass. Just imagine to never wonder where your next clients are going to come from next month. And all you need to do to make that a reality is head over to clientsindroves.com. That's clientsindroves.com and register for the free training. Marco, are you ready for the Thunder Round?
Yes. Okay.
If you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't, and what would the answer be to that question?
The question that I would like to ask, if you are in a meeting of people and you left the room, what would they miss? And my answer on that, they would miss my courage, my motivation, and my smile, which is my trademark.
If you could go back in time and meet the 20-year-old Marco, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, I would say to him, you can become anything you like, son. You have what it takes. Don't be so hard on yourself. You are an amazing young man with huge potential.
What is the one thing most people don't know about you?
Well, this is a bit humoristic, but I was a hammer thrower champion, second of the Netherlands 1 year in my junior years.
Respect, dude. If you could meet one person you have not met yet, what would you ask them, or what would you want to know from them?
Who I want to meet? Nelson Mandela. And then I would ask him, what were your top 3 mistakes and what did you learn from them that changed your life for the better?
What is the best advice you have ever received?
Well, that's a tough one. I think the best advice from John Maxwell, investing in your personal development. Growth is the only guarantee that tomorrow gets better. So start growing today.
Now, before I ask you what your favorite book is, tell us a bit about your podcast called Rise Smarter.
Rise Smarter. Well, Rise Smarter is a podcast that I'm busy in launching, and it is about conversations with either potential guests who want to be coached live. So it's for the brave of hearts about a topic of choice, because I want to give people the experience what the power of coaching can do for them. And maybe also guest speakers or for who I invite for interviews, all with the aim to give you helpful perspectives in order to maximize your life and to change your inner game for maximum impact in your life.
Awesome. I'll definitely tune in. So tell us, what is your favorite book and why?
My book is The Dream Giver. Of course, I read so many books, but The Dream Giver was the instigator of starting my coach journey. And why? Because it's a parable about the man who's called Ordinary, who lives in the land of familiar, and who one day finds a feather in his room or the windowsill, and it started his journey to pursue his dream. And in order to do that, he has to face the land of familiar and go into where his basically dream is. So he faces all kinds of obstacles. It's a parable, and I love the parable because it really speaks to your heart. And that resulted into what we're basically doing now.
Then let's wrap up this podcast with the last question, and then we'll say goodbye. Who do you specifically work with, and who should contact you if they want to work with you? Basically, who is your ideal client, Marco?
My ideal client are females who, for some reason, along the way in their journey, on their path, have been derailed because of a crisis or because of things that they have encountered that has been maybe painful. And they want to basically get the crown that they lost back, the crown of confidence. And they want to have their sword back, which I talked about earlier, the sword of purpose. And they want to make an impact in the world. And so maybe also women who have lost their voice, I call it the lion's roar, that they may have been silenced by, whether through circumstances or people in the past, but they want it back. And so they are women who are mindful, are decisive about leaving shadowland, as I call it, and want to embrace the unlearning, because a lot of the things we pick up in life is basically not helping us, and want to become more in the process. So she's a person who no longer wants to dwell in the houses of superficiality or avoidance or ignorance, and recognizes and concluded that the masks of hiding or keeping appearances or performance or justification is not doing her well. And that she recognized, I want to improve the quality of my thinking so that my impact in this world as a woman of destiny is worth living for. So that's my ideal client.
So if you want to connect with Marco, just head over to marcostephano.com or visit coachesspotlight.com and type Marco in the search bar, and you'll find the show notes to this episode and all the links that lead to Marco. Now, we've invited Marco to come back on the show in about 2 weeks, where he's going to hold a mini masterclass and talk about how men play a role in the empowerment of women in the modern age. So if you're interested to learn about this topic, you definitely want to subscribe so you get a notification when that show goes live. With that said, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Marco, it was a real pleasure having you on the show, and looking forward in talking with you soon.
Thank you so much, Oliver, for this great opportunity. I really loved it and enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Coaches Spotlight podcast. If you liked the show, then please make sure to rate us, leave a review and subscribe. We appreciate your support. See you next time.